Well, hey, John Meyer here, and I'm back with another episode in my series on making music for licensing with an emphasis on production music libraries. I've been working through the process of creating an album. Last week I broke down a track, and I'm going to do something very similar this week, but I'm going to go more in depth into the virtual instruments that I chose, the samples that I used, and the choices that I made along the way. Here's the track. I'll play it for you before I break it down. And last year I went to the beach in Galveston, Texas, actually Galveston Bay, put the drone up and shot some footage during golden hour, so I thought that would be a nice underscore for my underscore. So now we're going to go into kind of the nuts and bolts of the track and see how I made it. I've got a 5-year-old right on the other side of the glass building trains, so if he comes in, we'll edit him out, like I edit all of my other mistakes out. Pro Tools, thankfully, has come up with these new folder tracks, which is very exciting because we can actually put all of our instruments in folders, and that makes it a lot easier to create templates. Now, I must admit, I'm not really a template guy. I don't do a lot of orchestral arrangements. I mean, I do some hybrid type thing, but for the most part, I'm trying to implement everything I've got: audio tracks, guitars, all that stuff, pianos. And so templates haven't worked for me in the past. It doesn't mean that I won't try to make them work in the future, but just full disclosure. But I want to use the Pianobook samples, and what I've noticed is that there's so many of them, and sometimes the names don't really make sense to me as to what they actually sound like, and so just sorting through and loading them into Kontakt each time is a pain. So I've created a basic template here where I've imported, and I've just got some basic folders that will continue to evolve: keys, percussion, winds, stringed instruments, pads, and effects. And so I can open these up here, and you can see some of the tracks that I am using. This is not the mixed version of the track. This is kind of about 3/4 of the way through the process of writing the track. Everything is still in MIDI. Sometimes I leave things in MIDI to the very end and then print them. Sometimes I know I want to manipulate them in the audio format and wave format, and so I'll print them early on and then do some manipulation. But I purposefully left all the MIDI intact at this point so you can kind of hear how I came about this. Now, one thing I learned a long time ago, and I think it's very important for people that are, if you're just getting started, is that we worry so much about those first lines that we write, the first chords, the first notes, and we think if that's not right, then the rest of it's not going to be right. You know, what I've learned is to not care so much about that. Oftentimes I'll overwrite a piano piece or a guitar, and it'll take up too much space. And so one trick that I implemented this time is I wanted to kind of get into the mood and the feel and the vibe of a track. So I just started messing around with this felt bottle. I'll link to all these in the description so you can go grab them from the Pianobook site. But I'm going to start off by muting this. Here you can get an idea of what I created with this felt bottle. I use the arpeggiator on my Arturia key step, and it sounds like I had it to 16th notes or 32nd notes, and in a random pattern. So I played some random chords, and it's got this hold function, so whatever chord you play, it holds it until you play a new chord. And I'm in the key of D, so I was just kind of playing some high notes and letting it work its way through. Now, after that, I have Decapitator which I decapitate everything. I cut everything's head off. I use it so much for simple shaping of tone, low cuts and high cuts, and some drive, not a ton. And I use that because oftentimes it's easier than pulling up an EQ, and it can do a handful of things, and it adds some saturation to it, and it's just a fun plugin to use. I've got a lot of the low end rolled off because I don't want this to interfere with any of the chordal stuff that I'm going to do later on. I have this duck plugin, and it's a random preset called Skippy 2, and it's just adding some more movement. I talked about this in my last episode, this plugin, which is just so cool because it allows you, one, to do some basic things like eighth note pulses or whatever, but these random things create patterns that I would never think of. I know that I'm going to add more stuff to it as well. So I've got this Echo Boy with a simple eighth note pattern. And then I put a lot of reverb. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to use this in the end. There might be some moments where I bring it in, but it kind of got me in the mood, and it was more fun to write to than a click track. Okay, the next thing I did was I loaded up a piano, and I've got, I know this is Dan Keen's, the King's Upright, and my felt piano, and I blended them together. So here is the sound. Let me go ahead and turn the processing off. I should play the sustain pedal, huh? If I can find it. Where is it? Seriously, where's my sustain pedal? I gotta rig up a better system than this, guys. I'll be back. Okay, here we go. And I'm using my Arturia to play these piano parts, even though it's like 2 octaves, because yes, I did spill a drink on my other keyboard and I have not repaired it yet. Here's Dan's Alone. And here's my piano. They're very different felt piano sounds, and so I thought, well, let's put them together, because why not? We do whatever we want. I like the top end on mine. I like the richness of his, the warmth on the bottom end, and so together we have this simple ascending E minor to D over F sharp, G. It never resolves to D here. And then I have a Pultec EQ just to cut out a lot of the low mids and a lot of the bottom end. Again, this is not, I'll show you what I do here in a minute on how I transfer this into my mix situation, but this is not final EQ, but it may end up being. Sometimes there are things I know I want to tweak in the mix, and sometimes, hey, if it sounds good, you just put it. I'm learning to commit more and more and more and more as I go. Instead of sending the verb to my effects returns, I just went ahead and I added it on the track because that was easier. And I wanted it to be part of the track, and I also wanted it to force myself to write a simple part. And when I have a lot of reverb, I tend to write in a more simple way. If I don't have reverb, I tend to doodle more, and that's not really wanted. I wanted to build this track up with a lot of elements, and I wanted the piano to be foundational, but I didn't want it to take over. All right. And then I thought I got to give these. While we're on Dan's sounds, I got the soft string Spurs. I am adding some Hall, which is this Pro R over here on my auxiliary returns. But there's nothing extravagant about what I'm doing here. I just tried to play his sounds the way that I heard them. As they decay, then I would think about switching. Just some random... no melody that catches your ear, just kind of in the background. I may even cut it down some more because it doesn't take a lot to distract from the final vocal or the final voiceover. And also, when I create my alternate mixes, this will probably be the first thing to go in my first alt. So it'll be the track minus this, because even though I think it's beautiful, here I added in 2 parts. Great job on that, Dan. Yeah, so there's that. Now, let's see what else. I'm trying to do this in the order that I created. Oh yeah, I went for some rhythm here. So I have this tongue drum, which I apologize. I think it was only an EXS24. I created a version of it for Contact, and it's not as involved as your version, whoever made this in the EXS24. I just dragged the samples in and tweaked. I think that's how this all went down. Forgive me if I'm wrong. But I have two versions of it here, and this first one, I did some serious manipulation. I did two things. One, I took the low note and I brought it all the way down the keyboard, and I liked the way that, let me get down there. I like the texture of that quiet note, so I raised it up to where they're playing together. When they play together, way down low, has a nice pulsing feel, and I played it octaves here. Because there's that pattern, and then as the song builds, I have this pattern. So I like that so much that I duplicated it. Let's look at the processing on this. So if you get rid of everything, and then I add an EQ, you can see I dipped a lot of the low mids and boosted the low frequencies. Now I have this Slate VMR. Let's see what I'm doing with this. Oh yeah, so one trick I like to implement is I'll load in this earth. I don't think I'm doing much. Well, I'm doing some more low frequency boosting and cutting to really scoop it out, just low end. And then I add this earth plugin, which I love to use. I engage the low cut, and you bring up the Q, and I usually do the slope around 12, and then you can go and kind of hunt around for the frequency where it really has most of its, I guess you'd say, fundamental frequency, but then it's dropping off. So it's a cut, but then there's a boost at that frequency, and then everything else stays the same. And so I use that frequently to just really pinpoint where that low frequency needs to be and bring it out. And then I decapitated it. Let's see why. Let's see. I did somewhat of the same one. There's a lot of drive. The thump is up, and that's basically the same process as what I did with the VMR, and I'm darkening it up. So it's louder, but the drive is kicking in, and it's just making it stand out ever so much more. And then I have my Echo Boy. 16th note. I have my width set to minimum so that everything is kind of happening in the center channel. And I've rolled off some of the low frequencies, so it's really just the top end. So basically you hear the low frequencies once, and then you hear the delay on everything above whatever frequency this is. You never know with Echo Boy. You just have to kind of listen. Use your ears, right? All right, so there's that. And then I have this sound as well. Okay, same tongue drum, but let's go from the top. So it's still below the sample range, but it's up an octave from where we were before. And I wanted to have this kind of a consistent pulse throughout. So let's see, I added the Pultec EQ. Again, cutting some lows and dipping some low mids. Followed up by a compressor. Fast attack, fast release, and it's louder too. Forgive me. That output should probably be down, but I'm not messing with it now. And then I have little Alter Boy, a pitch plugin, which I have it raised up an octave from there. It just does something to the sound that's really cool. Of course, Echo Boy. So I'm playing a syncopated pattern with the tongue drum, but then I have the 8th note, so you get that kind of dotted 8th feel. Together with the other drum. I'm using a sound that really doesn't sound like either of those, but it's fun to make. In this A section, that's pretty much it looks like. Ah, the subtle clarinet. What a great sound. Reminds me of the British Drama Toolkit from Spitfire, if you've got that. And so I'm treating it very similar to the string spurs, the soft spurs. Except I got a little handsy here. Played more than one note. We have a section of clarinets now. Treating it like a pad sound. And so that played throughout the A section here. I'm also learning this process of recording my screen, recording the sounds, recording me talking, and there are moments when they're on top of each other, so just forgive me as I learn to work through these kinks here. All right, now we move on to our second time through all this, the ending. I didn't want to make a building epic track with big drums because that's not always what's necessary, but a little build never hurt anybody, and if someone sticks with this vibe, with this track for longer than a minute, it gives them an option to build the energy and to increase the energy ever so subtly. So I added some low hits with this rainbow drum. Started. Looks like I was in here in big drums too, and I made some adjustments, most likely to the attack and release time. The beauty of these plugins that we get from Pianobook is with my stuff, go in there and make it work for you, and I'm doing that with this plugin just to give it that super low hit. You notice there's something weird in the beginning, but let's see what Decapitator did to that sound. Oh yeah. I rolled all the top end off, made it super dark, and then a slight boost to get that thump frequency that I spoke about earlier, and then drive. And then of course, plenty of reverb. And the key here is to make sure that your low cut is all the way down if you want those low frequencies to continue on. Now, if I were to raise this up, then the low frequencies aren't going to carry over. Got to be careful with this in the mix because you can overpower things. It doesn't need a ton, but I wanted to have that somewhat dramatic hit there to say, we've got a new section. All right, I also added in these pad sounds, which are amazing. This Lowery Pad, beautiful sound from Matt and Aaron. And you can see that I have the mod wheel controlling the expression, and then the spaced echo preset from Echo Boy. If you get rid of it, it's still cool, but I wanted more of that continuous. And I love these space echo sounds. The style here, it's space echo. It's a dual echo with an 8th note and a 1/4 dotted delay, but you don't necessarily hear the rhythms. Also, I'll often go in the tweak setting to adjust the width, because for this sound, I want it to be super wide. I recorded it at the same time with this quiet choir, which is a beautiful choir. And again, I copied the same settings from the Lowery Pad. So here they are together. I thought that was a nice sound. The sparkle, the top end from the Lowery Pad, but then kind of that thick vocal quality from the quiet choir. All right, Now for bass, I started off with the Requiem. You can see I'm playing octaves, and let me get rid of these things. I'll show you how it started. Just playing super low notes, treating it like a bass. And I decapitated it, just to give it a little bit more something, darkened it up. It looks like I raised the low cut and engaged the thump. Then I added more low frequencies with this enhancer plugin from Pro Tools. Now, there are better plugins, and I probably need to invest in one. I used to have R-Bass, but then I decided, Waves needed me to spend a couple $100 on plugins that I already owned to upgrade, and I just wasn't in the mood. But that brings in some low frequencies. I've got the low gain way up at 153 hertz. And then I gave it some movement. Duck, again, such a cool plugin. And notice that it's only set to 32%. One thing about these plugins when I'm in MIDI, sometimes the timing is just not quite right. So that might be a circumstance where I would go ahead and print it and then adjust later in audio, slide it back and forth to get where I wanted. And then I decided that wasn't quite enough bass for me, so I added in my own sounds, ones that I will try to make available for you later. And you can see the same octaves, and I'm using my Juno sub setting just to have that extra low inconsistency. I think all that I have left is the tape delay experiment. So I played a simple pattern. I'm not sure exactly what I did to these. I assume maybe they were all straight up. And then I brought Duck back in again just to give it more emphasis on the 8th note. Now, I don't know if it matters a ton. It helps it be a bit more consistent. I like the chaos aspect of it, but not so much chaos, right? And then Echo Boy, I know, just overuse it. But I wanted to have that 30-second note especially. Without all this, right after that, the microphone on my camera died. I realized that today when editing, and it's Thursday, I got to get this thing out on Friday. So that's all you get for this episode. I was talking about reverb returns and committing tracks and beginning to talk about the mix process. So if that's stuff that you're interested in, please leave a comment and let me know. I have some ideas of what I'd want to do with this channel. There's some samples I want to release and interviews with composers that I've already recorded that I want to share with you. But other than that, I'm kind of relying on you to guide the way. You've already asked so many great questions and made so many suggestions, and I'm going to try to implement those. So please leave comments. I'll get back to you as best I can. And until then, if you wouldn't mind liking this video, if you're still with me after 25 or whatever minutes this is, and subscribing, and that stuff really helps and encourages me and does stuff with the algorithms and the math and all that I don't understand. But until then, enjoy your week, and I'll be back next Friday.